How many sketchbooks is too many? I don't really want to talk about it. I thought it might be nice to do a little sketchbook check-in, kind of something in between a sketchbook session and a sketchbook tour. I've got a lot of sketchbooks going right now, and so I'm just going to take a few minutes and walk through these. This is my general all-purpose sketchbook. I think if you're only going to have one, this is the kind to have. One that you don't really care what you put into it. I have a lot of studies I do in here. The weekly studies that I do with the Discord community, they happen in here. Thumbnails for the children's book I'm working on, or some thumbnails from Inktober. This is actually a thumbnail from Inktober 2 years ago. So this sketchbook's been something I've been working on for a long time. But I think it's really important to have a sketchbook that you don't really have a whole lot of lines with. Something that you can just throw whatever you want to into it at any point in time. So this one has lots of studies. It has the robot series I'm working on. It has these cute little vegetable creatures and critters and characters that I've been playing with recently. So this is just my general all-purpose sketchbook. If I'm only going to take one with me, this is the one that I take. This is my favorite sketchbook. Maybe my favorite sketchbook I've ever had. It's wonderful. The paper is like the perfect thickness, and having it be toned like it is means that I can work with white, I can work with black, I can work with midtones. It's thick enough that nothing really bleeds through it. In the early days of working on the sketchbook, which is what you're seeing now, I did almost entirely black and white, even some charcoal. And then I started working with things like this, with acrylic markers and brush pens and such. Everything works in this sketchbook, and I've only had one page in here that's actually wrinkled from me getting so much stuff into it. I've done a lot of sketchbook session work in this one, but I also lug this one around with me almost all the time. Whenever I take my backpack anywhere, I generally take this and the all-purpose sketchbook and my computer, and that's about it. In these last couple pages, you'll see how I prep drawings. So a lot of time, I'll just start a drawing with one of my black brush pens, and then later on, I'll go in and fill things in. And then this is a bunch of studies from our Discord community where we worked on cephalopods for a week. I love all things tentacles and eyes, as you've probably gathered from my prior work, so that's why you see that there. This sketchbook is one of my new additions. I finished off a mixed media sketchbook not terribly long ago, and it was a wonderful experience. I've been playing around with these alcohol markers. I've never spent any time with them. I'm a little bit concerned because they still bleed through this paper, but I think I just need to take them onto Bristol, which, sneak peek, you'll be seeing my Bristol sketchbook later. So this one has a lot of studies and then just playthings that I've done. I'm only a couple pages into this sketchbook, but this sketchbook's also only 30 pages long, I believe. This one was one of our weekly drawings on the Discord community. I mentioned it a couple times, but like we work together working on things each week. It's really a lot of fun. And if you need a community, if you want some people to work with, I would highly recommend jumping into that. This fish here on the end is actually a watercolor piece. That's one of the reasons I love mixed media paper so much, is it gives you the ability to work with such a broad realm of mediums. And I happen to be one of those people who can very seldom make up my mind about what I want to work with, so I bounce back and forth. This is a fun little sketchbook. I haven't worked with small sketchbooks for a long time, but I've got a couple right now, and you'll see the two of them in sequence now. This is my gouache sketchbook. I only work on gouache in here, and gouache has been something that I very recently, just the last 2 or 3 years, discovered, and I love it. I don't love the finished texture nearly as much as I love watercolor, but the fact that I can take white over dark tones makes up for that in spades. So this whole sketchbook is just gouache paintings. I'm maybe a third to a quarter of the way through this one right now. This palm tree was actually done when I was in Hawaii with my family, as was this snail. They had these giant snails there that were like the size of your fist. It was really cool and crazy. But this sketchbook's a lot of fun, and it's really small and easy to transport, so I have a tendency to take this one with me on airplanes and when I travel. This sketchbook is a very recent addition, and I'm going to start putting stickers on all my sketchbooks because it's cute and it's fun and my daughter loves it. This one is going to be all birds. Primarily watercolor, although I will probably use some gouache in here, but I guess gouache is kind of just opaque watercolor. And I start a lot of them with ink. You might have seen a couple of these in some of the sketchbook sessions, but this sketchbook is a lot of fun. It's thick enough that I can work on both sides. It's watercolor paper, but this sketchbook has been a lot of fun, and it's just adorable. I mean, look at that. The T-Rex and the little dumplings in the teapot. It's just super cute. So we're actually getting out of the sketchbooks I'm using right now, but I wanted to show this one off real quick. I just picked this up not terribly long ago, and as you can tell, my daughter has taken it in. She has adopted it. So I ordered myself another one just like this, so I'll have one to work on. I am loving the toned papers. They're just wonderful. This sketchbook, I'm only 2 pages in, but it is some of the best paper I have ever used. I'm just not pushing forward on it because I've got other ones that I want to work on. So these little drawings in here are going to be watercolor little creatures, little sprites of some kind. This is hot pressed. It's perfectly smooth and it's wonderful. So that is the end of my traditional sketchbooks, but as you're gonna see in just a moment, I have a whole bundle of others that are just, they're for bigger things. Now, I don't really think of these as sketchbooks. I know technically they are, but they're really more for large-scale projects. So I've zoomed out now on the camera, but if you look at the size of my hands, you can tell these are much, much bigger than the ones we were just looking at. This is a large watercolor sketchbook. It's actually more of a medium-sized one. And this is just one I keep around for working on watercolor pieces. I've had this one for years. I work very slowly. But the one beneath it, this Bristol sketchbook, is massive. I don't even have anything in this one because this is the one that I use for the large pieces that I do for most of the podcasts, the brush pen and the ink pieces. These sketchbooks are gigantic. And again, I don't really think of them as being sketchbooks because I do projects in them. And as you're going to see in this one, sometimes those projects take a very, very long time. Now, this does bring up a little bit of a question as far as like, well, what is a sketchbook? Like sketchbooks are something in my mind that we take with us, that we transport. These are just conglomerations of large quantities of paper that happen to be bound together. They're not particularly embodying of any of the conveniences that we enjoy when it comes to sketchbooks. But sketchbooks they are technically. These are the ones that I work on with my really big projects. And this last one here, ironically, is just what I do when I don't have a whiteboard handy. Fortunately, in my office/studio right now, I have a big whiteboard. But as you'll see in just a second, this is what I do when I don't have whiteboards. I was a teacher for so long that I plan in this way. I just plan visually. So this is how I was thinking through like curriculum and how you would actually teach someone to draw. Well, as always, thanks for tuning in. I hope that this was helpful. Just a brief glimpse into what my sketchbook obsession looks like. And so if you also find that you have way too many sketchbooks floating around, you are not alone. You're not that weird. We just like having lots of toys to play with. Well, have a good one, y'all. See you soon.